an alternative to what the Democrats have proposed. What we've heard over the last 3 months out of the Democrats is a party that is speaking with hyperbole, fear-mongering, gaslighting the public, and they're rooting for failure, not just for the state of Connecticut, but for the federal government and the country as well, all because politics is more important to them than actually being responsible and doing a budget that is balanced and sustainable. In 2017, we put our fiscal guardrails in place because Connecticut for decades ran on budgets that were unsustainable. And we're here to say that Democrats could actually do a budget if they wanted to that is sustainable for the residents of Connecticut. Instead, they're putting forth a budget that has more tax increases, a capital gains tax, and we have a governor that has proposed eroding our guardrails as well by eliminating the volatility cap, which is exactly that, has protected the state of Connecticut from a volatile budget process. Republicans are not willing to do that, and we're here to give the state of Connecticut a reality check. Our budget is within all of the guardrails. It maintains important services like special education and education funding for our districts. It also protects our health care, and it addresses the Medicaid crisis that we have in the state of Connecticut by raising rates. It provides money to our nonprofits in order to sustain them. I think the state of Connecticut is going to love this budget. Our taxpayers are going to love this budget. The people that aren't going to love this budget are the prisoners, the illegal immigrants, and the government bureaucrats.
As you often hear, a budget is about priorities, and I think when you review our budget, you will see the priorities of the House Republican caucus reflected quite well. The very first thing I would like to talk about is high level in our spending caps. This budget is under all of the caps. We do not break any of them. In the first year, we are under the spending cap by over $44 million, and in the second year, we are under the spending cap by $858 million. It protects all the fiscal guardrails, keeps the volatility cap the way it currently is. And on the revenue side, we are not spending all the dollars that are available. We are under the revenue by $10 million in year one and $177 million in year two. One of the things that we heard most about in the last year definitely has been about the electricity rates for the residents of the state of Connecticut. We have fought tirelessly up here to try to get review of those public benefit fees, and we have often said that we can afford to put some of them into the state budget. Our budget does just that. We are going to be reducing the public benefit fee by about 25% and putting that amount into the general budget and a small piece into bonding for the EV chargers. We're providing tax relief to our towns through committing to fund the excess cost grant at the tiered levels and continuing on the hold harmless practice, which makes it so towns do not receive less ECS, or education cost sharing funding, than they did in prior years. This is imperative because this is a direct hit to property taxes, where people are feeling a lot of pressure right now, and budgets at the local level are expanding because they cannot rely on the money that they're being promised from the state of Connecticut. We are fulfilling that promise and keeping those dollars in. We're looking at healthcare costs and multiple different pieces here. First of all, we have reviewed the Medicaid study that was done, and we are actually funding $137 million of the $150 million that is required to increase the rates for Medicaid. On top of that, we are expanding the Katie Becker waiver so we can take more people off the waiting list to help these sick individuals and getting them the care that they need. We're also doing something that both the governor's office and the Appropriations Committee didn't do, and that is we're actually funding our contractual obligation for state employee and retiree health care costs. Both of the budgets that have been presented prior to ours are very dangerous in the fact that they know that these expenses are climbing and are going to be higher, and they have chosen to not fund them, to say that we hope we'll be able to find savings to do that. But if we don't find the savings, we're just going to take it from the OPEB savings account. This is a practice that's gotten Connecticut in trouble in the past, when we are not actually budgeting for expenses that we know and hoping that we have savings to cover it. It's dangerous. I don't know anybody in the real world who does something like that. We're also removing $13 million directly from health insurance premiums. The Malloy administration, when the times were tough with budgets, they took about $4.5 million in programs and they shifted it to an assessment on people who have insurance. That $4.5 million has ballooned to over $12 million because it's in an off budget, it's in the insurance fund, nobody's really being held accountable to that. We're moving those expenses back onto the general fund, which will be a direct reduction in health care premium. Other things that we're doing is we're providing critical funding for cold weather shelters to protect homeless individuals in the winter. As you know, we've seen an increase in homelessness in the state of Connecticut, and we're committing to making sure we've got facilities for that. We're increasing funding for domestic violence outreach in a couple of different places in this budget. And we're also increasing the funding for nonprofit providers, exceeding the governor's proposal at 3% a year. So you might be wondering how we managed to do all of this and still stay under the caps when that is not something that has been achieved by the other side. Well, we put in a lot of hours to find taxpayer savings. We reviewed the last 3 years of actual spend. We looked for opportunities where there were lapses and deficiencies, and we've made all those corrections. We're cutting healthcare costs for illegal immigrants. At this time, it is projected that it's going to be about $116 million over the biennium for illegal immigrant health care costs. But we are keeping in place the emergency Medicaid. So if somebody, regardless of their status, needs emergency care, they can get emergency Medicaid. Instead, we're taking that money and we're funding Medicaid rate increases. Instead of giving $386 million more to the higher education units, bringing them over $1 billion of tax-subsidized payments for adult learners, we're giving them a modest increase of 8%, which is a higher increase than a lot of the other budget lines are getting. And we're taking that $386 million, and instead we're giving you $430 million of public benefit fee relief. Sorry. Our plan imposes a 2-year wage freeze on state employees. The last few years, state employees have gotten a 33% increase in one-time pensionable bonuses. We're saving $330 million over the 2 years by doing that. And what's good for the goose is definitely good for the gander. We're also removing automatic pay increases for legislators and all of the elected bodies, which is going to save us nearly another $1 million. We're reducing operating expenses overall throughout the state agencies by 5%, resulting in a 2-year savings of $67 million of their other expense line. Most importantly, we're continuing to listen to the state of Connecticut residents who showed up en masse in 1992, where 82% of the people who showed up to vote said, "We want you. You cannot spend more money than we make." They asked us to change our Constitution to establish a spending limit. It's the highest amount of votes ever put on any question. No elected official has even come close to that vote. Currently, Governor Lamont got 657,000 votes. 830,000 people showed up and said, "We want you to not spend more money than we make." And that is what established the spending cap. We are listening to them. We're staying within those limits because we respect the voices of the voters, and we agree that government has to live within its means.
And how important it is for the state of Connecticut to see Republicans in the House of Representatives lead and chart the way forward. And Representative Nuccio mentioned that a budget is about priorities, and House Republicans are prioritizing taxpayers and small businesses. I'm going to say it again. We're prioritizing taxpayers here in the state of Connecticut and small businesses. Our budget has a clear vision for Connecticut. Okay, you can predict out over the next 2 years where we are going to be with this budget. There's no gray areas. As I mentioned, predictability. And what does it come down to? Well, it comes down to kitchen table issues. A lot of families across Connecticut are struggling to pay their bills. They sit down each night around the table and they decide, hey, how much money do we have in the bank? How much money do we have left over to pay our electric bill? How much money do we have for groceries? Well, this budget addresses that. This budget gives these families predictability. Namely, in the place where Republicans have stood time and time again, and that is to reduce electric bills. You know, I said a couple weeks ago, electric bills are too damn high. This budget seeks to reduce the public benefits charge by shifting a lot of that unnecessary hidden tax. Actually, it's not even a hidden tax. It's a tax on your bill that you see every month in that fourth column over to the general fund, where we as legislators can debate, legislate, and then pay for it appropriately out of the general fund. You know, there's no secret about what happened last week. The Democrats on the Appropriations Committee and in the Finance Committee passed a budget that does not add up. So, to put it into layman's terms, you go to a restaurant, you order something off the menu that costs $60, but you only have $48 in your pocket. What do you tell the waiter when they come over? Oh, I spent $60, but I only have $48 to give you. That's what happened last week. The Appropriations Committee blew through the spending cap. They spent a lot more money than Governor Lamont even had presented to the legislature in February. And then the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee passed a package that doesn't add up to what the Appropriations Committee did. So this budget was crafted in coordination with both committees, i.e. a Ways and Means Committee. It adds up. Again, it gives predictability to families and businesses across Connecticut. There are no gimmicks in this budget. And most importantly, it keeps our fiscal guardrails intact. Both sides in this building have touted how great these 4 fiscal guardrails are. We've saved over $700 million just in Aid Act savings in the last 7 or 8 years. That's been able to get used into our budget for critical services. That's because we've paid down debt. We've restored our rainy day fund. We've held the line on tax increases. Why would we go back on that, especially in uncertain times like these? And finally, I think this is the best part of our budget, and that is that we seek, through a convenience tax, to help out Connecticut workers that are being unfairly taxed in the state of New York. So what does that mean? We have many remote workers, especially since the pandemic took place. We have people working from home 3, 4, 5 days a week, yet they're paying the New York income tax. This budget seeks to reverse that. So Connecticut would actually capture that tax to the tune of $320 million. I'm going to say it again, $320 million. That's real tax dollars, and the governor has said we want more taxpayers, not taxes. That's real tax dollars here in the state of Connecticut, where these workers would be paying a lower rate if they paid the Connecticut income tax rate. And what does that do? Well, Representative Nuccio mentioned realitycheckct.com, and I would implore everyone here and those listening at home to take a look at realitycheckct.com. There's this $320 million item that's going to, should this pass, we're going to let residents across Connecticut log on to our website and pick which tax relief they want. So it's an option where we can kind of take the show on the road and tell people, hey, we've found a way as House Republicans to not only help these remote workers, but raise more revenue, and we want you, the public, to tell us which tax relief you would like.
And I think the last piece of our budget just demonstrates that we believe we need to listen to the residents of Connecticut. All too often we hear the frustration and anger over the unaffordability of our state. And we should be taking that money from New York, who is unfairly taxing our own residents who are working in the state of Connecticut. And if we do that, we should be asking the general public, what do you want to see in tax relief? And that is what we're doing. We're giving that option to the general public. If we could get the $320 million back online, what tax relief would you like to see? And I'd finally like to point out that that proposal is not, that money is not relied upon in our budget proposal. So we are balanced without it. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
The savings from state employees, obviously, they have contracts in place for their wages. Are you concerned that you won't get those savings if they don't agree to a pay freeze?
So in the past, the state of Connecticut has employed in times we could suspend arbitration. We would just have to pass the wording that says we are suspending arbitration for 26 and 27, and then we can achieve those savings.
But I mean, if they were to challenge that, saying, this is to create tax cuts and funding elsewhere, and they would challenge maybe perhaps we're not in an emergency, do you think that would hold up? Are you concerned?
There's legal precedent to do that nationwide. It's been done. And I think it's frustrating when you have a governor that is willing to say that under his watch he's always going to give raises to our state workers while the rest of the residents of Connecticut hasn't seen those raises. We think 33% raises over the last 5 years is plenty and it's excessive. And it's about time we prioritize the residents of Connecticut and not our state workers. So I don't think it's unreasonable to ask them to go 2 years without increases. They can live off of the 33% increases that they've seen.
In government inefficiencies, have you identified where those savings would come from?
Absolutely. As I said, I did a 3-year analysis of all of the spending. I'm an accountant by trade, and there's not nearly enough accountants in this building. I looked at the 3-year spending at a line item level for every department in the state of Connecticut. On average, there's a low year is we have about $280 million in excess costs built into the budget. So what we did is we looked line by line, some areas that were easy to identify, other areas were in the other expense line item. So we took a 5% cut. It's $33 million-ish dollars. It's extremely generous. When you have $300 million left on the table at the end of every year, we're saying less than 30 million of that is attributable to items that we could look at and say you just need to live within your budget.
Tammy, could you comment on the deputy commissioner positions, and also do you have an estimate for what the average residential electric bill would go down, how much they'd save a year or a month?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're also doing in our budget is we're eliminating all secondary and tertiary deputy commissioners. It ends up being about 17 head count, I believe. And that's just because, again, government has gotten kind of fat. And I think it's time to trim. So we can manage these areas with one commissioner and not with, one and a deputy commissioner or 2 deputy commissioners. And I'm sorry, the second part of your question? Electricity. So I'm just going off of a general, right? The amount of money that we're looking right now to reduce would be about 25% of the public benefit fee. So it really depends. I think Vinny might have some more specifics.
Yeah, so I think it's a little bit of a moving number because the public benefit charges is a percentage of your bill. So when you think about the commercial industry, which last year paid $500 million of that public benefits charge, which I think is more than 50%, that certainly is going to reduce their bills significantly. Overall, the range is between $10 and $20 for the average household per month to reduce their bills with this proposal.
I would like to add, though, on top of that, as I mentioned before, Eversource had a $275 million that they were trying to give back to residents. And PURA has decided they're only going to give back, I think, $147 million or something like that. That $225 million, or $275 million at the time, they were saying was estimated to lower bills between $20 and $40 depending on your usage. So if you look back at that number and then you look at what we're offering, and I think they ended up saying the $147 million was going to be around $13 on average. So if they got that 13 plus ours, you'd be looking at a good chunk of that public benefit fee, which I think is very important to people right now. It is still one of the top things that we're hearing about, and that's why it is just such a miserable fail that none of it is adjusted in the governor's or in the appropriations budget at all. The number one thing people are screaming about has been ignored, kind of like us. So we're not ignoring it anymore.
The $900 million under the spending cap in the second year, obviously I'm sure you'll expect a lot of groups saying we could use a chunk of that. So what's the rationale that, at least for now, just not?
You have to look at it in its totality. This is not just about spending up to the limits. It is about sustainability. And when we see the consensus revenue yesterday that is showing another downgrade, the sales tax trends have been down for well over a year. People that have businesses in this state realize that the economy has been soft for well over a year. Democrats want to just blame President Trump's tariffs. We sort of see a bigger challenge ahead of us, and that is why we're not going to spend up to these caps. And we've also left room in our revenue to address the downturn in our consensus revenue.
My grandmother used to always tell me, just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? So having that money there available, it's there if we need it. We also have revenue that would be available if we need it. but just because you can doesn't mean you should.